Throughout history, the corridors of power have witnessed a fascinating phenomenon where absolute authority intertwined with unchecked madness. In the grand theatres of empires, some rulers transcended the boundaries of eccentricity, venturing into territories where reality and delusion became indistinguishable. These weren't merely powerful individuals, they were living embodiments of what happens when unlimited authority meets psychological instability. The concept of imperial madness stretches across civilizations and epochs, from the marble halls of Rome to the gilded chambers of Byzantine palaces. These rulers, who held the power of life and death over millions, often exhibited behaviors that would be considered clinically insane by modern standards. Yet protected by their divine right to rule and surrounded by sycophants who dared not question their actions, they continued to govern vast empires while descending deeper into their psychological abyss. What makes these cases particularly compelling is how their mental state influenced the course of history. Consider how entire empires trembled at the whims of these unstable minds. Cities were built and destroyed, wars were waged, and policies were enacted based on hallucinations, paranoid delusions, or simply inexplicable urges. These weren't just personal struggles, they were episodes that shaped the destiny of nations. The historical records paint vivid pictures of rulers who declared themselves gods, engaged in conversations with spirits, or made decisions based on the most bizarre reasoning imaginable. From emperors who appointed horses to government positions to those who ordered armies to wage war against the sea, these accounts sound more like dark fairy tales than historical facts. Yet, meticulous documentation by contemporary historians, court records, and archaeological evidence confirms these extraordinary events. Understanding these rulers' mental states requires us to consider the unique pressures of absolute power. Imagine being told from birth that you're divine, that your word is law, and that no one can challenge your decisions. Add to this the isolation of high office, the constant threat of assassination, and the weight of governing an empire. It's a perfect storm for mental deterioration, especially in individuals who might have already been predisposed to psychological instability. This exploration of imperial madness isn't merely a collection of shocking historical anecdotes. It's a profound study of power's effect on the human psyche, a warning about the dangers of unchecked authority, and a reminder that history's greatest empires were sometimes at the mercy of minds that had lost touch with reality. As we delve deeper into these extraordinary tales, remember that these weren't fictional characters, but real rulers whose actions shaped the world we inherit today. Through examining these historical figures, we gain valuable insights into the nature of power, the importance of checks and balances in governance, and the eternal human struggle with authority. Their stories serve as eternal cautionary tales about the thin line between power and madness, between divine right and delusion, between authority and insanity. If you're ready to embark on this fascinating journey through the darkest corners of imperial history, join us as we explore the lives, decisions, and legacies of history's most unstable rulers. These aren't just stories of madness. They're lessons about human nature, power, and the often catastrophic consequences when both spiral out of control. Join us as we navigate through these extraordinary tales, where historical fact surpasses the wildest fiction and where the consequences of unchecked power reveal themselves in the most unexpected and often terrifying ways. Welcome to the world of history's maddest emperors. If you're ready to dive into this fascinating journey through history's craziest emperors, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Legacy of Empires channel so you don't miss any of our adventures through the past. Gaius Caesar, Augustus Germanicus, better known as Caligula, stands as perhaps history's most notorious example of imperial madness. Born into the prestigious Julio-Claudian dynasty in 12 AD, his early life was marked by privilege and tragedy. The nickname Caligula meaning little boot, came from the miniature military boots he wore as a child while accompanying his father's legions. When Caligula ascended to the throne at age 24 in 37 AD, Rome initially celebrated. The young emperor's first 6 months showed promise, with popular policies and public works. However, this golden period ended abruptly, possibly following a severe illness that many historians believe triggered a psychological breakdown. What followed was a reign of terror that would become legendary. Caligula's madness manifested in increasingly bizarre and cruel ways. He began hosting elaborate orgies in the imperial palace, forced parents to watch their children's executions, and randomly ordered the deaths of citizens who displeased him. His sexual depravity became notorious, with claims he committed incest with his sisters and offered his wife to his favorite guards. Perhaps most infamously, Caligula's relationship with his horse, Incitatus, exemplified his detachment from reality. He built the horse a marble stable, furnished it with ivory mangers, and dressed it in purple blankets, purple being the color reserved for emperors. The horse received a house complete with servants, and Caligula allegedly planned to make it a consul, Rome's highest elected office. His grandiose delusions reached astronomical levels. He proclaimed himself a living god, appearing in public dressed as various deities, including Venus and Apollo. He ordered statues of gods throughout the empire to be replaced with his own image, and demanded citizens worship him. In one particularly extravagant display of megalomania, he built a 3-mile floating bridge across the Bay of Baiae using merchant ships, simply to ride across it in defiance of a prophecy that he had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the Bay of Baiae. Caligula's financial management was equally deranged. He depleted the imperial treasury on spectacular games and architectural projects, including attempts to build impossible structures. When funds ran low, he resorted to false accusations and property seizures to replenish his coffers. He even turned parts of the imperial palace into a brothel, forcing noblewomen to serve as prostitutes. His foreign policy was characterized by theatrical absurdity rather than strategic thinking. He planned a bizarre invasion of Britain that ended with his troops collecting seashells as spoils of war from Neptune. He declared war on the sea god himself, ordering his soldiers to stab the waves with their swords. The emperor's paranoia grew increasingly severe. He would walk through the streets demanding random citizens acknowledge his divinity. During public games, he would suddenly burst into uncontrollable laughter or tears. He frequently spoke to the moon and claimed to hear voices. His erratic behavior extended to his personal relationships. He would alternately embrace and threaten to execute the same people within hours. Caligula's reign of terror lasted less than 4 years. In 41 AD, the Praetorian Guard, unable to tolerate his madness any longer, assassinated him along with his wife and infant daughter. He was 28 years old. His brief but devastating reign became a cautionary tale about the dangers of absolute power and mental instability in rulers. Modern historians have speculated about the causes of Caligula's madness. Theories range from inherited mental illness, there was significant inbreeding in his family line, to temporal lobe epilepsy, and even lead poisoning from the Roman water system. Whatever the cause, his reign serves as a stark illustration of how one person's mental deterioration, when combined with absolute power, can threaten an entire empire's stability. The legacy of Caligula's madness continues to fascinate historians and the public alike, serving as a powerful reminder of power's corrupting influence and the importance of maintaining checks on authority, no matter how exalted the ruler may be. Nero Claudius Caesar, Augustus Germanicus, who ruled Rome from 54 to 68 AD, represents one of history's most complex and disturbing imperial figures. Ascending to the throne at just 16 years old, Nero's reign would become synonymous with artistic obsession, megalomaniacal excess, and devastating cruelty. Unlike many Roman emperors who focused on military conquest or political reform, Nero saw himself primarily as an artist. He trained extensively in music, poetry, and theatre, often forcing the Roman elite to endure hours-long performances where he would showcase his supposed talents. His artistic pursuits weren't merely a hobby. They became an all-consuming obsession that often took precedence over matters of state. The most infamous episode of Nero's reign occurred in 64 AD, when a catastrophic fire engulfed Rome. The fire raged for 6 days and 7 nights, destroying 10 of Rome's 14 districts. While the popular image of Nero fiddling while Rome burned is technically inaccurate, the fiddle hadn't been invented yet. Contemporary accounts suggest he watched the conflagration from a safe distance while singing the Sack of Ilium, a classical Greek epic accompanied by his lyre. This moment perfectly encapsulates Nero's disconnection from reality and his people's suffering. While thousands of Romans lost their homes and livelihoods, their emperor viewed the destruction as merely dramatic inspiration for his art. More disturbing still, some historical accounts suggest Nero may have orchestrated the fire himself to clear space for his ambitious architectural projects, particularly his golden palace, the Domus Aurea. Following the fire, Nero's behavior became increasingly erratic. He launched a campaign of persecution against Christians, blaming them for the disaster. His chosen methods of execution were particularly theatrical and cruel. He would have Christians covered in animal skins and torn apart by dogs, or turned into human torches to illuminate his gardens at night. Nero's artistic pretensions extended to every aspect of his rule. He established the Neronia, a festival of music, gymnastics, and horse racing modeled after the Greek Olympics, where he would invariably emerge victorious in every artistic competition. No one dared to outperform the emperor, regardless of his actual talent level. He would often force senators and nobles to perform alongside him in theatrical productions, humiliating them for his entertainment. His personal life was equally dramatic. He kicked his pregnant wife Poppaea to death in a fit of rage, then attempted to find a male replacement who resembled her. He had his mother Agrippina murdered after several failed attempts, including an elaborate plot involving a collapsible boat. These actions weren't just crimes, they were performances in Nero's ongoing theater of cruelty. The emperor's grip on power began to slip as his behavior became more outlandish. He embarked on a tour of Greece, performing in various cities and invariably winning every artistic competition he entered. Meanwhile, Rome's administration fell into disarray, and military commanders grew increasingly dissatisfied with their artist emperor. Nero's end was as theatrical as his reign. When the Senate finally declared him a public enemy, he fled Rome with only 4 servants. Upon hearing approaching horsemen, he forced one of his servants to help him commit suicide, allegedly uttering the famous last words, "What an artist dies in me." The legacy of Nero's reign extends far beyond the famous image of him playing music while Rome burned. He represents the dangerous combination of absolute power, artistic pretension, and mental instability. His rule shows how an emperor's personal obsessions could take precedence over an empire's well-being, and how the desire for artistic immortality could lead to real-world catastrophe. Modern historians continue to debate Nero's true nature. Was he genuinely mentally ill, or simply an entitled ruler who took his artistic pretensions to dangerous extremes? Whatever the truth, his reign serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power in the hands of someone who views the world and the suffering of others merely as material for their art. The image of Nero performing while Rome burns remains a powerful symbol of imperial disconnect and the dangers of ruling through artistic fantasy rather than practical governance. His story continues to fascinate and horrify, serving as a reminder that when absolute power meets artistic megalomania, the results can be catastrophic for an entire civilization. Pause for a moment and reflect. Which of these crazy emperors has shocked you the most so far? Share your opinion in the comments. And if you're enjoying this trip through time, don't forget to leave a like to support the channel. Ivan IV Vasilievich, better known as Ivan the Terrible, stands as one of history's most complex and brutal rulers. His reign over Russia from 1547 to 1584 marked a period of unprecedented expansion, cultural achievement, and horrifying violence, earning him a place among history's most unstable monarchs. Born in 1530, Ivan's early life was marked by trauma and violence. Orphaned at age 8, he grew up in a world of hostile noble factions fighting for control over his regency. The young prince witnessed countless acts of brutality, betrayal, and murder within the walls of the Kremlin. These experiences profoundly shaped his personality and his future approach to power. When Ivan assumed the throne at age 16, he became the first Russian ruler to formally take the title of Tsar, claiming equal status with the great emperors of antiquity. His early reign showed promise, marked by reforms, territorial expansion, and the modernization of Russian society. He created Russia's first standing army, reformed the legal code, and established trade relations with England. However, the death of his beloved first wife, Anastasia Romanovna, in 1560, marked a turning point. Ivan became convinced she had been poisoned by traitors among the nobility. This paranoid belief, combined with his inherent instability, triggered a reign of terror that would define his historical legacy. The most dramatic manifestation of his growing madness was the creation of the Oprichnina in 1565, effectively a state within a state. The Oprichniki, his personal guard and secret police, dressed in black and rode black horses, carrying symbols of death, a dog's head and a broom, representing their mission to hunt down traitors and sweep them away. They carried out widespread terror campaigns, massacring entire cities suspected of disloyalty. Ivan's paranoid rages often resulted in shocking violence. In a notorious incident in 1570, he ordered the systematic torture and execution of thousands of citizens in Novgorod, suspecting them of plotting to defect to Poland. The massacre lasted for 5 weeks, with victims being burned alive, impaled, or drowned in the frozen Volkhov River while their families were forced to watch. But perhaps the most tragic manifestation of Ivan's violent nature occurred in 1581 when he killed his own son and heir, Ivan Ivanovich, during a heated argument. According to historical accounts, the Tsar struck his son's head with his iron-tipped staff in a fit of rage, mortally wounding him. This act of filicide haunted Ivan for the remainder of his life, plunging him into periods of intense grief and religious penance. Ivan's mental state was characterized by rapid mood swings, alternating between periods of religious devotion and savage cruelty. He would spend weeks in prayer and contemplation, writing religious texts and participating in monastery life, only to emerge and order mass executions. He frequently wrote letters filled with self-loathing and requests for prayers, while simultaneously ordering brutal punishments for perceived slights. His personal life reflected his instability. He had 7 wives, in an era when Orthodox Christianity strictly limited remarriage, several of whom died under suspicious circumstances. He would alternate between periods of debauchery and strict religious asceticism, sometimes forcing his court to follow suit in both extremes. Ivan's legacy profoundly shaped Russian history. While he significantly expanded Russian territory and modernized its governance, his reign established a precedent for autocratic rule through terror that would influence Russian political culture for centuries. His death in 1584 left Russia in a state of economic ruin and social trauma, leading to the Time of Troubles. Modern historians debate whether Ivan suffered from specific mental illnesses or if his behavior resulted from the corrupting influence of absolute power combined with his traumatic childhood. Some suggest he may have suffered from mercury poisoning, as he was known to consume medicines containing the toxic element. Even the Terrible's reign serves as a stark reminder of how personal trauma, unchecked power, and mental instability can combine to create a ruler capable of both remarkable achievement and unspeakable atrocity. His story continues to fascinate historians and the public alike, representing one of history's most dramatic examples of how the personal demons of a ruler can shape the destiny of an entire nation. The historical impact of mentally unstable rulers extends far beyond their own lifetimes, leaving an indelible mark on human civilization that resonates to this day. These emperors' reigns offer profound insights into the nature of power and its effects on both the rulers and the ruled. The phenomenon of imperial madness has significantly shaped political philosophy and governmental structures. The experiences under these rulers led societies to develop various forms of checks and balances, recognizing the dangers of concentrating absolute power in the hands of a single individual. The modern concept of separation of powers can be traced in part to the historical trauma inflicted by unstable autocrats. These rulers' legacies manifested in multiple ways. First, they often triggered significant demographic changes through their actions. Caligula's purges of the Roman nobility, Nero's persecution of Christians, and Ivan the Terrible's decimation of entire cities led to population shifts that altered the social fabric of their empires. These changes sometimes had unexpected long-term consequences, such as the strengthening of Christianity under Roman persecution, or the emergence of new power structures following the elimination of traditional aristocracies. Economically, these rulers frequently left their nations in ruins. Their excessive spending on personal projects, coupled with arbitrary confiscation of wealth and disruption of trade networks, often resulted in severe economic crises that persisted long after their deaths. Nero's financial excesses, for instance, contributed to an economic instability that plagued the Roman Empire for generations. Culturally, these rulers often inadvertently sparked artistic and literary movements. Their reigns became cautionary tales, inspiring countless works of literature, art, and philosophy, examining the nature of power and madness. Shakespeare's tyrants, for example, often reflected characteristics of these historical figures, while Renaissance political philosophers like Machiavelli drew important lessons from their reigns. The architectural legacy of these rulers presents an interesting paradox. While many of their building projects were driven by megalomania, some resulted in remarkable achievements that survive to this day. Nero's Domus Aurea, though built through oppression, significantly influenced Renaissance architecture when its ruins were rediscovered. In terms of governance, these rulers often implemented administrative reforms that outlived their chaotic reigns. Ivan the Terrible's centralization of Russian state power, despite its brutal implementation, laid the groundwork for modern Russian state administration. Similarly, even Caligula's reign saw the implementation of some beneficial bureaucratic reforms that survived his downfall. Their impact on military affairs was typically disastrous, with many of their armies weakened by arbitrary leadership changes, poorly planned campaigns, and the diversion of resources to personal projects. However, these failures often led to important military reforms under subsequent rulers, who learned from their predecessors' mistakes. Perhaps most significantly, these rulers changed how societies viewed leadership and divine right. Their obvious madness challenged the notion that rulers were divinely appointed and inherently superior to their subjects. This questioning of divine right would eventually contribute to the development of modern democratic principles. The psychological impact on their societies was profound and long-lasting. The collective trauma of living under an unstable ruler often resulted in cultural changes that persisted for generations. Societies developed various coping mechanisms, from elaborate court protocols to systems of indirect resistance, many of which became integrated into their cultural DNA. Their reigns also provide valuable insights for modern political science and psychology. The study of these rulers helps us understand how power affects mental stability, how societies cope with unstable leadership, and what institutional safeguards might prevent similar situations in modern times. The legacy of these rulers serves as a perpetual warning about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of maintaining robust institutions. Their stories demonstrate how the mental state of a single ruler can affect millions of lives and alter the course of history. In our modern world, where discussions about power, leadership, and mental health are increasingly prominent, these historical examples remain remarkably relevant. These cautionary tales from history continue to influence contemporary political discourse and institutional design. They remind us that the fundamental questions about power, leadership, and human psychology that their reigns raised remain relevant today. Understanding their impact helps us better appreciate the importance of institutional checks and balances, mental health in leadership, and the delicate balance between authority and accountability in governance. The journey through the lives of history's most unstable rulers reveals timeless truths about power, human nature, and the delicate fabric of civilization. From Caligula's deranged excesses to Nero's artistic megalomania, from Ivan the Terrible's paranoid brutality to countless other examples of imperial madness, a singular truth emerges. Absolute power not only corrupts absolutely, but can transform ordinary human beings into monsters capable of unthinkable acts. Looking at these historical figures through a modern lens, we find disturbing parallels in contemporary power structures. While today's world has established numerous checks and balances, the fundamental human tendencies that led to these historical tragedies remain unchanged. The isolation of leadership, the intoxicating nature of power, and the danger of surrounding oneself with sycophants are challenges that continue to plague modern governance. These historical cases serve as mirrors reflecting our own time's power dynamics. In an era of increasing authoritarianism in various parts of the world, the lessons from these imperial reigns become particularly relevant. We see modern leaders exhibiting similar patterns of behavior: grandiose self-perception, persecution of perceived enemies, and an increasing disconnect from reality. The psychological impact of power remains a crucial area of study. Modern research in psychology and neuroscience has begun to understand how power physically affects the brain, potentially reducing empathy and increasing risk-taking behavior. The ancient examples we've examined provide historical evidence for these scientific findings, showing how power can fundamentally alter human behavior and decision-making. Perhaps the most important lesson these stories teach us is the vital importance of institutional safeguards. The societies that suffered under these rulers lacked effective mechanisms to check royal power or remove unfit leaders from office. Today's democratic systems, imperfect as they may be, represent humanity's attempt to prevent the rise of such unchecked authority. Yet we must remain vigilant. The human tendency to accumulate and abuse power hasn't disappeared with the advent of modern governance. The stories of these mad emperors serve as eternal warnings about the fragility of civilized society and the constant need to protect against the concentration of excessive power in any individual's hands. As we close this exploration of history's most unstable rulers, we must ask ourselves, how can we better safeguard our own societies against the abuse of power? What mechanisms can we develop to ensure leadership remains accountable and grounded in reality? How do we balance the need for effective leadership with the dangers of unchecked authority? These questions remain as relevant today as they were in the times of Caligula, Nero, and Ivan the Terrible. Their stories are not merely historical curiosities, but vital lessons that continue to inform our understanding of power, leadership, and human nature. And so we conclude another fascinating journey through ancient history. If you've enjoyed this time-traveling adventure, please don't forget to leave a like, share this video with friends who share your passion for history, and comment below with your favorite mad emperor. To ensure you don't miss our future explorations of the past, make sure to subscribe to the Legacy of Empires channel and activate notifications. Together, let's continue unraveling the mysteries of great civilizations. Remember, understanding the past isn't just about memorizing dates and events. It's about learning from humanity's greatest triumphs and darkest moments to build a better future. Until our next historical adventure, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring the fascinating world of ancient history.